In 1930, a detective named William Cross found something in the dusty archives of Jerusalem that would change how he saw every crime scene for the rest of his life. Let me tell you what he discovered. Picture this. It's a Thursday night. 13 men gather in a borrowed room for dinner. They're celebrating Passover, breaking bread, sharing wine, telling stories. But one man at that table is carrying a secret. His name is Judas, and in his pocket is the promise of 30 silver coins. Now, I've studied crime for years. I know what betrayal looks like, but here's what makes this case different. Judas wasn't some stranger. He wasn't a hired assassin. He was family. He managed the group's money. He walked the dusty roads with these men. He knew their fears, their dreams, their hiding places. And sitting across from him at that table was Jesus of Nazareth, the man he'd already agreed to sell. Here's where it gets chilling. Multiple witnesses say that during the meal, Jesus looked directly at Judas and said, "What you're about to do quickly." The victim knew. He knew, and he didn't run. He didn't call for help. He just let him go. Judas left the room. The scripture says simply, "And it was night." Let me take you back 3 days earlier. Judas walks into the chambers of the religious authorities, the Sanhedrin. They've been looking for a way to arrest Jesus quietly, away from the crowds. And here comes Judas, one of Jesus' own inner circle, offering them exactly what they need. "What will you give me," he asks, "if I hand him over to you?" They count out 30 pieces of silver. That's not a random number. Under Jewish law, that's the price of a slave, the compensation if your ox gores someone's servant. Judas just valued a human life at the cost of livestock. But here's what haunts me. He didn't ask for that amount. They offered it, and he accepted. He sold his teacher, his friend, his rabbi, for the price of a slave. The deal is simple. Lead them to Jesus when he's alone. Identify him clearly so there's no mistake. And Judas knows exactly when and where that will be. He knows Jesus goes to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane late at night. He knows the layout. He knows Jesus will be vulnerable. He has access. He has opportunity. He has inside knowledge. He has everything he needs to execute the perfect betrayal. Now it's Friday, midnight, the Garden of Gethsemane. If you've ever been there, you know it's quiet. Ancient olive trees with twisted trunks create shadows in the moonlight. It's a place of peace, a place of prayer. Jesus arrives with 11 of his disciples. He's troubled. Witnesses say he's sweating so hard it looks like drops of blood falling to the ground. It's a real medical condition called hematidrosis. It happens when someone is under such extreme psychological stress that tiny blood vessels burst. He knows what's coming. He asks his closest friends to stay awake with him, to watch, to pray, but they're exhausted. They fall asleep. So Jesus prays alone, asking if there's any other way, but he knows there isn't. And then, in the distance, torches, lots of them, the sound of armed men marching through the garden, swords, clubs, temple guards, and Roman soldiers, and leading them all, like a guide through familiar territory, is Judas. Let me paint you this scene, because this is where the forensic evidence gets devastating. The armed crowd stops at a distance. They're waiting for the signal. They need to know which man is Jesus. It's dark. There are several men. They can't make a mistake. Judas walks forward. He approaches Jesus directly, and here's what the witnesses all agree on. Every single one of them tells the same story. Judas says, "Greetings, Rabbi," and then he kisses him. Not a handshake, not a pointed finger, a kiss.
the traditional greeting between a student and a beloved teacher, the gesture reserved for intimacy, for respect, for deep affection. He turned love into a weapon. He took the symbol of closeness and trust and used it as the signal for arrest. The kiss wasn't just identification, it was desecration. It was betrayal wrapped in affection. And Jesus looks at him. The witnesses say he looks right into Judas's eyes and calls him friend. Even in that moment, even as the armed men rush forward, even as everything falls apart. Friend, he says, do what you came to do. The arrest happens fast. One of the disciples tries to fight, draws a sword, cuts off a soldier's ear, but Jesus heals the wounded man and tells his followers to stand down. No resistance, no escape attempt. He surrenders peacefully. The disciples scatter into the night. They run, they hide, they disappear into the shadows. And Judas stands there, watching the man he just sold being dragged away in chains. 6 hours later, as the sun rises over Jerusalem, something breaks inside Judas. Maybe it's the reality hitting him. Maybe it's seeing Jesus beaten, on trial, condemned. Maybe it's the weight of what he's done crashing down all at once. Witnesses report he runs back to the temple, to the priests who paid him. He's shaking, crying, barely coherent. He throws the 30 silver coins at their feet, the money scattering across the marble floor. "I have sinned," he screams. "I've betrayed innocent blood." And you know what the priests say? These religious leaders, these men of God? What is that to us? That's your responsibility. They got what they wanted. His guilt is his own problem now. This is the moment that tells you everything about Judas. He wasn't a psychopath who felt nothing. He wasn't a cold-blooded criminal. He was a man who made a catastrophic choice and then couldn't live with what he'd done. He leaves the temple. He goes to a field outside the city, a place where they bury foreigners and unknowns, and he hangs himself. The body is found hours later. The fall or the rope breaking has ruptured his abdomen. It's a brutal death, alone, in a field of strangers. And those 30 pieces of silver? The priests can't put blood money in the temple treasury, so they use it to buy the very field where Judas died. They turn it into a cemetery for foreigners. The place becomes known as Akeldama, the field of blood.
Now, I've spent years trying to understand this case. What makes a man betray someone he loved? What makes a trusted friend become an informant? Here's my assessment. Judas wasn't motivated by simple greed. He returned the money. He wasn't evil from the start. He was chosen, trusted, given responsibility. He wasn't coerced. He volunteered. So what happened? I believe Judas loved an idea more than he loved a person. He wanted a revolutionary, a political messiah, a king who would overthrow Rome and restore Israel's power. He had expectations, and Jesus didn't meet them. Jesus talked about loving enemies, about turning the other cheek, about a kingdom not of this world. And I think Judas couldn't reconcile the man he followed with the mission he expected. So he made a choice. Maybe he thought he could force Jesus' hand, make him fight, make him claim power, prove he was the king Judas wanted him to be. He was wrong. And by the time he realized how wrong he was, it was too late. The kiss was given, the arrest was made, the machine was in motion, and Judas couldn't stop it. By Friday afternoon, Jesus was dead, crucified on a Roman cross, and Judas had already taken his own life hours before. He never saw the end of what he'd started. 3 days later, the tomb was empty.
Reports spread that Jesus had risen, but Judas wasn't there to see it. He was buried in the field his betrayal had purchased. Standing in that garden in 1930, Detective Cross understood something profound. The worst crimes aren't committed by monsters. They're committed by ordinary people who make terrible choices, by friends who lose faith, by believers who get disillusioned. Judas had every advantage: access, trust, inside knowledge, and he used all of it to destroy the one person who, even in the moment of betrayal, called him friend. The kiss was perfect, the crime was flawless, but Judas forgot one thing. You can betray another person, but you can't betray yourself and survive. 2,000 years later, the garden still stands. The olive trees still remember, and somewhere under the stones of Jerusalem, 30 pieces of silver bought a field where strangers are buried. Some betrayals are so profound they echo through history forever. This was one of them. In the end, the kiss didn't just identify Jesus, it destroyed Judas too. Because that's the thing about betrayal. It kills both the betrayed and the betrayer. It just kills them in different ways. The kiss that changed everything. If this narrative moved you, challenged you, or made you think differently about betrayal, trust, and human nature, subscribe, like, comment, join the conversation. What would you have done in Judas's position? Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted? Share your thoughts in the comments below.